Karlowski, Vice President. Chairman of Cox International. I can manage it. I'm not sure if I can. Okay, I'll let you in. Right. We're right here at the Houston Hall, Museum Student Center. My name is Rabbi Kahane. I'm Vice President of the organization of Brotherhood of BSDFF. This is Herb Sidman's brother, Yaakov Sidman. Just telling him that for the past couple of days I put up posters announcing for Rabbi Kahane, and they've all been torn down within 24 hours. The administration has been very, very agitated about this. They've tried to stop this. Many of the student organizations have tried to stop this. As you can hear the chants right now. I came up last spring as a prospective freshman, and I encountered the debate of Rabbi Kahane coming to speak at this school. I was very disappointed that the school, which prided itself on free flow of thought and speech, imposed such measures as to bar the rabbi from speaking here. 2 weeks ago, I helped form a club called Brandeis Students Dedicated to Free Speech, which I hope would help provide new avenues of which students here can help express their views. I've run into quite an amount of difficulty in trying to get Mr. Kahane here. The school first imposed the secured, quote-unquote, security fee of $1,628, and I believe the rabbi says it best himself when he compares that fee to the poll taxes imposed on the blacks in the South. It was obviously a blatant attempt by the administration to bar him from speaking here. The allocations board of the Student Senate did come up with a very generous $1,000 allocation to the fund. However, on principle alone, it was decided that no money would be paid. My next step is to invite Rabbi Kahane on as my personal guest. Last night, I received a letter hinting that if I brought him on, I would be personally liable for any harm that would come out of this event, and I could face possible suspension or expulsion from the school. Undaunted, however, I contacted the ACLU, and this morning I went to the office of the president. I was told there that it indeed was my clear right to bring on Rabbi Kahane as my personal guest. With no further ado, I present the founder of the Jews Defense League, the former Knesset member, the chairman of the POC organization. It's my pleasure to introduce Rabbi Kahane.
Defamation is always the last refuge of non-fiction. Most of you people have come to hear me speak and to decide for yourself. Let him speak because he is winning friends for me. Leave him alone. Leave him alone. Eventually he'll calm down. When I arrived here, I saw this flyer, Give Peace a Chance. Written by people who live in America.
Written by an Israeli.
Who is in America. Who is in America. And the tragedy is that people who live in this country and who can't even spell Hebrew properly talk about giving peace a chance as if I don't want peace. I want peace more than any person in this room because I don't live here. Because I live in Israel and my two sons are now in the army. I don't want peace. What an outrage.
You want an outrage.
What an outrage. What an outrage that these leftists here who are not only carrying signs against Kahane, but against the policies of Israel and who therefore the policies. Bear in mind, this is not against Kahane. These are the genocidal policies of the state of Israel. How many people really think that Israel practices genocide? I cannot tell you how important it is that they have shown up. So that you will understand that it isn't only Kahane. They're opposed to the fact that the state of Israel.
Bullshit!
And my name is Kahane. One introduction deserves another. I've come here so that you will listen and decide for yourself. No one has a right to tell you who can speak and not speak. And no one has a right to shout down anyone. That's not what colleges are about.
Can the Palestinians speak in Israel?
So therefore, I suggest that no one answer him. Leave him alone. I can certainly handle myself. The Intifada did not begin 3 years ago. The Intifada began 70 years ago in 1920. And in 1920, in Jerusalem, Arabs massacred Jews, and they massacred Jews in Jaffa. In 1929, 67 Jews were murdered in one day in Hebron. And I never understood what was bothering the Arabs in 1920 or 21 or 29. I never understood it. But now I understand it. The reason why the Arabs massacred Jews in 1920 and 1929 was because of the occupied lands of 1967. Of course, why didn't I realize that before?
Now your answer to murder is payback to
You
hell?
see, the Arabs massacred 67 Jews in 1929 because of the genocidal policies of an Israel which didn't even exist. Can you not understand the tragedy that is taking place here? In 1936, 37, 38, there were 3 years in which 510 Jewish men, women, and children were massacred before there was a state. What was bothering them in 1936 and 37? Kahane, the state of Israel, the lands of 1967? And if the problem is the lands of 67, how wonderful it must have been in 1966. In 1947, when the UN proposed a partition plan which would have created a Jewish state called Israel and an Arab state called Palestine, and the Jews accepted it, and the Arabs said no. Why did they say no? What was bothering them in 1947 when they could have had a state which included not only Judea, Samaria, and Gaza, but the Western Galilee, and such cities as Nazareth, and Akko, and Nariah, and Jaffa, Yaffo, and Ramleh, and Lod, Lida, and Beersheba, and where now stands Ashdod and Ashkelon. They could have had all of that, but instead they went to war, and 6,000 Jews died in that war. What was bothering them? Let me tell you what was bothering them in 1920, and 21, and 29, and 36, and 67. What was bothering them was the fact that there was a Jewish state of any size, of any shape, of any form. And if, God forbid, we would listen to these crazy Jews here, there would be no Jewish state. So no guilt. They suffer from an advanced, specific form of Jewish AIDS. It's called guilt. It's called guilt. There are certain kinds of Jews who have honed guilt to a fine art. They feel guilty about everything, whether we did it, we didn't do it, we are guilty. I remember in Lebanon, in Beirut, Christian Arabs massacred Muslim Arabs. Who was guilty? The Jews. Did the Christian Arabs form a commission? Did they form... Right out. Don't feel guilty. They had their opportunities over and over and over again for a state called Palestine. And they refused because they believed that they could have everything. So they speak of now of moderate Arabs. In a more sophisticated version, there are now moderate terrorists who presumably murder Jews moderately.
What about the Jewish terrorists?
So therefore, listen carefully. There is not one Arab speaker who, if he came to Brandeis, would ever be picketed by an Arab. And know that they are not riddled with guilt as these people are. Zionists against racism. Now listen carefully about Zionists. I see a sign, Zionists against racism. I want to know what they mean by that, and let me explain what I mean by that question. The basic law of Israel is called Chok HaShvut. You can ask an Israeli here what that means. It means the law of return. The law of return was passed not by Meir Kahane, but by Ben-Gurion in 1950. The law of return says any Jew has a right to come to Israel and automatically become a citizen. Any Jew. Is that a racist law?
It doesn't say any Arabs can.
It certainly does. It certainly does. It says a Jew and not a non-Jew. A non-Jew has to go. It may be a racist thing, but I didn't pass it.
We're not a race.
Judaism is a religion, not a race. You convert to join
So
Judaism.
then don't talk about racism then. I am looking at the sign that says Zionists against racism. It's not my sign in the That person carrying that sign, Zionists against racism. And how many times would that person who suddenly became a great tzaddik, how many times has he taught Kahane a racist? So therefore, either there is racism, or there isn't racism. The law of return, which applies to Jews only, is either a racist law, or it's not. And I will tell you something, that had Ben-Gurion not passed that law, and when I was in the Knesset, had I proposed a bill, word for word, of that law, do you know what he would have called me? A racist. Zionists against racism. I want to ask you if there is one Arab in Israel who thinks that that law is not a racist law. I want to ask you whether there is one Arab in Israel who wants to live in a country called the Jewish state. How many Jews in this room would like to live in Jerry Falwell's Christian state? You don't. And that's exactly as many Arabs who want to live in the Jewish state. Their problem is that they have nothing but contempt for the Arabs. They have nothing but contempt. Their problem is that they have nothing but contempt for the Arabs. Because the same Jew who would not want to live in a Christian state says, but the Arab would like to live in the Jewish. I have thought, excuse me, you don't help me by that. You don't help me by that. Don't worry about it. The tragedy is that they're not willing to listen because they grow uncomfortable as they hear what I have to say. Consider how many Arabs in Israel enjoy singing their national anthem, Hatik. Think for a moment. The Arab of Israel stands up, shoulders back, chest out, as he proudly sings the words of his national anthem, Hatikva, the words, Nefesh Yehudi Homiyah, which I'm sure you all know, which means the soul of a yearns. It really speaks to him. It really moves him. And when he concludes with the words of the Zionist national anthem, his anthem, since he is a citizen, and he finishes with the words, Hatikva bat shnot alpayim, the hope of 2,000 years, tears trickle down his cheeks. As he thinks to himself, how my Zeta waited 2,000 years for Jews to come home. Hatikva means the hope. It was the Jewish hope for 2,000 years to come home. It was the Arab nightmare. It was the Arab nightmare. And so understand that I speak and don't react to them. And you listen carefully and understand how they are unwilling to grant the same freedom of speech that they would grant to a Jesse Jackson, that anti-Semite, if he showed up here. Nevertheless, we continue.
Because you make me look
Now,
bad.
it may be a painful thing for an American Jew to hear, but you have to think carefully about the contradiction that exists between democracy, between Western democracy, as you know it here, and the Jewish state as was founded by the Zionist founding fathers. And listen carefully why I say this. Why I say this. What is Zionism? Zionism is the movement for the creation of a Jewish state. What does a Jewish state mean? A Jewish state means that after 1,800 and more years of not having a state of our own, in which we enjoy such wonderful benefits as pogroms and crusades, Inquisition and Auschwitzes, we finally turned to the world and said, thank you, world, for everything, but no thanks. We want our state. And we want to be masters of our fate and captains of our ship. And that's why a Jewish state means that the Jew will control that state always. So therefore, that's what a Jewish state means, that the Jew will always run it. But what does Western democracy say? Listen, Western democracy says that if the Arabs will sit quietly and stop throwing rocks and stop attacking and stop using violence, that if the Arabs will sit quiet and have babies and quietly and peacefully and democratically become the majority, then as a majority they have the right to run the state. That's what democracy is, majority rule. So therefore, the question that arises, and which I put to Rabbi Axelrod, who I see is Rabbi Axelrod here? And so the question that I pose is to every person here, do the Arabs, in theory, do they have in theory the right to peacefully and democratically become the majority, elect 61 members to the Knesset, which is the majority, and then vote Israel out of existence as a Jewish state, the way the Jews voted Israel into existence as a Jewish state? Have they that? If he says yes. Every Democrat will say yes. But if you're a normal Jew, you say never, never, no! And how easy it is for him who lives here, who lives here, how easy it is for someone who lives here, how easy it is to live for someone who lives here to say they have the right to vote Israel out of existence. We who just 50 years ago went through an Auschwitz because we had no Jewish state. And this tragic figure here, has the chutzpah, the gall to tell us that we have to bow to the dictates of Western democracy and lose our state, the only thing that prevents the world from giving us another Auschwitz. That will never be. That will never be. So, I continue. We have to understand that they are not ready to deal with this issue. And that's why they shout. Rather than listening and at the end asking a question, they shout. Because they cannot debate, so they shout. So let's continue. I've raised a very, very serious question of the contradiction between Western democracy and a Jewish state. It is a question that you have to deal with, and you can decide as this unfortunate person did. That, yes, that democracy has the right to put an end to the only Jewish state around, yes. Or you can be normal and say, we owe the world nothing, and they owe us everything. And therefore, never, ever... I'm always impressed by someone who talks about the Ten Commandments and forgets the other 603. I'm always impressed by someone. I'm always impressed by someone. I'm always impressed by someone who would not know a Jewish concept if he tripped over one, telling me, an Orthodox rabbi, what Judaism is. So I want to quote to you now. Notice the lack of ability of this poor person to stand and listen. He has to interrupt. I listened to you long enough? He will decide what is long enough for you. Whether you agree with me or not, that's up. Shouldn't you be outraged that this person here takes it upon himself to decide how long I can speak, not speak, yes speak? Who is he to tell you? Who is he to... I was invited on this campus by a student. This person here would not be attacking Jesse Jackson this way. And I'll go...
How do you know?
I'll bet my mortgage home knowing him now.
Knowing him. And so
I
well
want
you
to
do.
quote to you from the Talmud. Now, this is a quote from the Talmud, which of course he has never seen.
Oh.
I said you have never seen this particular quote. You have never seen this particular quote, and indeed, I will ask the rabbi whether he knows this quote. From the Tanhuma in Shofim, I am now speaking to the rabbi. The Tanhuma in Shofim, the Tanhuma, which the rabbis state as follows. On the verse, Kitesei la milchama al oivecha, which means, when you shall go to war against your enemy. That's a verse in Sefer Dvarim, in the Chumash. On that, the Tanhuma says as follows. Mahu al oivecha. Why is it necessary to say against your enemies? Obviously, one does not go to war against his friend. So why did the Torah add, when you shall go to war against your enemies? Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Almighty said, Bo alehem toivim, go against them as enemies. Kishem sheinam lerachamim alechem, just as they will not have pity on you, kach atem no tirachamu alehem, don't have pity on them. Mayor Kahane did not like. I'm speaking now. When you're invited by a student, you can speak. I will now read one You will wait. When I have finished, you can then speak. I'm not finished. And I decide when I finish. Another quotation from Eile Darim Zuta, the Midrash, on the same verse. When you go to war against your enemies. Mashal, it is similar to a ro'eh shaya ro'eh sono bayah. It is similar to a shepherd who shepherded his flock in the park. Matzah gur echad shel zeh. He found a baby wolf. Most baby wolves are cute when they're babies. The chamalala. And he had pity on us. After all, what Jew doesn't have pity even on wolves? The hayam me'niko min ha'izi. And he nursed it. He took one of the goats, and he nursed this baby wolf back to health. Babam lachto, his employer came. Amar lo, and he said to the shepherd, Harovato, kill him. Shelo yiyet hakalat latzon, because otherwise he will be an impediment, a tragedy for the sheep. Kill him now. He's a dangerous wolf. That's what. The no Shamayla. He didn't listen to him. He saved him because, as I said, there were some Jews that have pity on wolves or the PLO. Now, Kevan Shegadal, when the wolf grew up, when it became a wolf, he used to see a lamb and he killed it. Gidi, a goat, he killed it. Amalo, so his employer said to him, Lo amalti lecha lo tachos, didn't I tell you not to pity on it? And on this the rabbis say that there were two kinds of mercy. There was Rahmanut, which means obviously we Jews are known as Rahmanim B'nei Rahman. And then there is a second kind of mercy the rabbis say, and they call it Rahmanut Shel Tipshim, the mercy of fools. Mercy upon who? The PLO? If they could, they would bring upon us the long night of Ibzah al-Yahud, slaughter the Jew. It's not an accident that so much of my support. It's not an accident that so much of my support in Israel comes from Sephardic Jews.
What about chapter 5?
It's not an accident.
He was a hero.
It's not an accident that so much of my support comes from Sephardic Jews. You know why? Because Sephardic Jews live with them. The Sephardic Jews live with them. They live in Arab countries. And they fled Arab countries. They fled Arab countries. They know what Arabs are. They live with them. This four-dimensional creature, you think, will sit down with Arafat over coffee and cake and work things out. Find the starting Jews who live with them in Morocco. Not for nothing did they overwhelmingly vote for Menachem Begin. And so much of my stocking comes from Sephardic Jews. They know what it was to live there. And that's why 800,000 of them fled. If it was so wonderful there, why did they flee? That's the tragedy. People here who sit down with them, have coffee with them, and cake with them, and work things out. The Middle East is not the Middle West. The Middle East is not Waltham. The in the Middle East, there is a different mindset and a different culture and different values. And when I hear people tell me about coexistence between Jews and Arabs, that's wonderful. Meanwhile, I'm waiting for a coexistence between Arabs and Arabs in Lebanon. It's such a pleasure watching them together. It is such a pleasure watching Arabs living together in Lebanon. Sunni Muslims and Shiites and Druze and Christians and Amal and Hezbollah. Everybody kills everybody else there. But of course, we will live with them because we have so much in common. Like that, my name is life. So therefore, understand how easy it is to speak about racism. The racist? Any Arab who, tomorrow morning, would convert, let's say, and become Jewish, is as Jewish as I am. This isn't a racial question. This is a national question, a religious question. Do the Jews have a right to their own particular specific Jewish state? And the Arabs say no. And this is a tragedy. They want us to compromise. They want us who live there to compromise. And if they gamble and we lose, who pays for it? Brandeis? Brandeis pays for it, or we pay for it? They began 4 wars with us, and they lost 4 wars. Now I want to tell you that in this world, if you start the war and you lose, you lose. And if you start 2 wars and you lose, you lose. And winners do not give up land. Losers who started wars lose. Now, I am all for land for peace. I am one of the great believers in it. I'll keep the land, and they'll have the peace. Anytime that the Arabs or the Palestinians want a state of their own inside Jordan, I'll help them. And they can call it Palestine, or they can call it Brandeis, whatever they want to call it. See that? I want to know whether this person will tell me, but Jaffa really is Jewish. Do I hear it once, going twice, going 3 times? Jaffa, until 1948, had 80,000 Arabs living there. You think that he doesn't think that Jaffa is also Arab? Of course he does. Akka was an Arab city, an all Arab city. You think that he says Akka is not Jewish? Haifa had 70,000 Arabs in it. Perhaps we should bring them back with their children and grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren. What do you want to do with the rest, Mayor? So that, first of all, I didn't realize I was on person's terms. The rabbis tell us that he then asked God, perhaps I did wrong, and God said, not at all. The land will be yours. It's in the Talmud. The land will be yours, and have no fear. Abraham didn't kill people.
Who did Abraham kill?
And Moses, Abraham, did he buy it?
Abraham
bought it. I want to salute what? Ignorance is one thing. Arrogance is a second. But the arrogance of ignorance is incredible. Jacob never played golf at the Dan Hotel in Caesarea. But Jacob lived in Shechem, which the Arabs call Nablus. And if you ask the Arabs, what do you call Nablus? So they say to us, that is the Arab name. Now let me tell you about Nablus. Not an Arab name. When the Romans expelled the Jews from our country, they changed the name of Shechem to Napulus, as in Naples. The Arabs have trouble pronouncing a P. So Napulus became Nabulus, and if anything, we should give it back to the Italians. Now, there is no Nablus, there is Shechem. There is no Al-Khalil, there is Hebron. There is no Al-Quds, there is Yerushalayim. There is only one reason why we should not give up land. It's not because it's needed for strategy. No, those are all valid reasons. But the reason is, it belongs to us. It belongs to us. Jews weren't ready to compromise in 1947. Jews didn't accept the UN plan in 1947? Of course we did. Of course we did. And Jews weren't ready in 1967, after that war, immediately to give it up.
Now we have the chance to make it real.
Now, we, notice the we. He lives here. We.
And now what's your
Wait.
solution to the poor soul who's born in the occupied territory? Some baby, what's his responsibility?
So therefore, no guilt. We Jews have been losers for such a long time. We feel guilty about winning. We've died for so long. We feel guilty about living. So let me tell you something. It is better to be a winner than to be a loser. And it is better to live than to die. And I would rather have a Jewish state that is hated by the world than an Auschwitz that is loved by it. After every Holocaust. They love us. They give us requiem masses. And Jimmy Carter builds us a Holocaust commission. You can shove it. I don't want Holocaust commissions. And I'm sick of Kaddish, and I'm sick of your side, and I'm sick of being the one that gets killed. I'm sick of it.
So let's kill other people? Is that
And
let's kill all the Arabs!
indeed,
Bring
the Arabs and down the war. Our rabbis tell us, if one comes to slay you, slay him first. That's in the Talmud. And how easy it is for people who live in Great Neck or Greater Neck or Greatest Neck to travel to me about what we should do and we should compromise. Yes, indeed. Now, so the question is, if we don't give up the land, and we will, believe me, we will not. We will not. What about the Arabs? So first of all, let us understand one thing. Let us not have contempt for the Arabs by thinking that if we raise their living standards, then they'll be good Arabs. And if we give them electricity and indoor toilets, then they'll sit quietly. You do not buy an Arab's national pride by raising his living standards.
Give them human rights.
They sincerely believe that the whole country belongs to them. They really believe that.
Just like you.
And they really, that's exactly right. I understand the Arabs, they understand me, and neither of us understand you.
Neither one of you understand compromise.
I was waiting for neither of us. The Arabs truly, sincerely believe that Zionism is colonialism, imperialism, racism. They really, really believe that. Now the fact that they're totally wrong doesn't mean that they'll change.
You're a Zionist, I'm starting to believe
So
that.
therefore, understand that we are in a tragic struggle with people who will not compromise. Suddenly, they want to compromise. After having started 4 wars and losing them, suddenly they've gotten smart. They realize they've learned a lesson from these types, that if you say nice things about Jews, they'll throw money at you or land. They had a chance for their state 4 times over. We lost 14,000 soldiers in the 4 wars that they began. They have it. A chance.
You want to compromise?
If they want a compromise now, I am ready to compromise.
What are you going to do about it?
Listen to me. I am one of the great compromise. I and Henry Clay. I am prepared, despite the fact that the land that is now called Jordan is really the eastern part of Eretz Israel. I am prepared to allow the Palestinians to create a state called Palestine inside Jordan.
Magnanimous of you.
I want to tell you that took a great deal out of it. But what one doesn't do for peace.
Why? Why are you looking to give up on Israel?
So therefore, let them know that if they want to compromise, I am one of those people that differs with the Israeli government about sitting with the PLO. I believe that we should sit down with them and tell them no. However, if you really would like a state inside Jordan, we can arrange that. But if they think that they can start 4 wars with us and murder our soldiers, and then come and say, let's start over again, go back to go, it's not a monopoly game. It's a deadly, deadly serious game in which they have dreamed and still dream of wiping out Israel. Now they want the lands of 67. The next day, if they should ever have it, it'll be the lands of 1947. And then we go back to 007. What do we do with the Arabs? First of all, we respect them and know that they won't compromise. Secondly, we understand that there is no difference between an Arab who lives inside the state of Israel and the ones who live on the other side of what they call the...
So they know Brandeis.
They both consider themselves Palestinians. Find me one young Arab student from in Israel who doesn't call himself a Palestinian. Of course they do. Therefore, the threat comes from a fifth column inside our country. The Galilee today, not Judea, not Samaria, the Galilee, northern Israel, today has a majority of Arabs. When you drive down the Akko Spot Road, except for Carmier, you won't find a single large Jewish settlement. You are in Palestine. Sha'am, Sachlin, and all the rest. Not only the Galilee, in the heart of Israel, just 10 kilometers, 6 miles from the sea, is the Mishulash, the Triangle, Wadi Arab. 250,000 Arabs, citizens of Israel, live there. Just behind such places as Petah Tikva, and Kosova, Herzliya, Tanya, Nana. They are a majority there, and they pose a tremendous threat to us. The day after the Temple Mount incident, you could not drive there if you were Jewish. The Intifada came there. Firebombs, Machsomim, barriers, stones. The Galilee was on fire. Wadi Arab was on fire. Jaffa, Ramle, Lul. I want to move the Arabs out of Israel. I make no bones about it. And I put it to you, what is better? Shooting them every single day and every single night? Is that better? Breaking their bones? It isn't I doing that. It's the government of Israel with a genocidal policy.
I want to demolish the mosque.
I don't want to demolish it. I just want to move the mosque off my Temple Mount. Can you imagine if I went to Mecca? Can you imagine if I went to Mecca?
Thank God.
And on the Kaaba, the holiest site in Islam, I built a synagogue. Not a big synagogue. Do you know what the Muslim world would say? And rightly so. It doesn't bother me that on my holiest site.
And their holiest sites.
They came and built a mosque.
What happens when they don't want to leave?
When they don't want to leave. In 1945,
No, in
The Pope, excuse me. I answer questions in my way.
I know.
That's what Rabbi said.
Kahane
Now,
wants to move a mosque.
in
Kahane's
1945,
whatever it means,
in
he wants to do it.
1945, the Poles and the Czechs expelled 12 million ethnic Germans from their countries. Right after World War II. They were ethnic Germans who had lived in those areas, Leitland, Danzig, and other places. They had lived there for 1,000 years. 1,000 years, and the Poles and Czechs expelled them within 48 hours. Do you know why? Let me tell you why. Because in the years preceding World War II, those Germans had been a fifth column who brought on Hitler and gave him the excuse for Munich and all the rest. And so after World War II ended, and the Poles and Czechs licked their terrible, terrible wounds, they said in their own way, never again. And they threw them out. They expelled them. Was that wrong? Was that wrong?
Yes.
Certainly. These are the same kinds of people. I remember when they hanged Eichmann in Romney prison in 1960.
Where you were.
In 1960, when they hanged Eichmann, Martin Buber, with 9 other boo-boos, stood outside that prison carrying signs condemning it. You don't take a human life. Adolf Eichmann. That's the same kind of insanity that infects these holier-than-thou people. The rabbis called it.
God
The
forbid we
mercy
treat human
of
life with
fools.
respect.
Don't take
And the rabbis then said, Kol harachem al harzar, sofo liot harzar al harachman, which means, for all the Israelis here, one who has pity on the cruel will someday be cruel unto people of pity and mercy.
He who saves
Don't
one
be
life
so
saves
good.
the whole world.
In World War II, in World War II, Allied bombers went over every night in World War II, Allied bombers
Read the text.
sent 1,000 bombers every night over German cities. They bombed those cities, blasted those cities. Who do you think that the Allied bombers were killing in Berlin, in Hamburg, in Bremen, in Munich? Generals? SS troops? They were
Do you wanna
killing
kill the women
men,
and children?
women and children.
Do you want to kill the women?
And I want to tell you that had this sad, sad person lived during World War II, he would have protested that too. But if that brought the war one day closer by breaking that German spirit and saved 12,000 Jews, because that was how many died every day in Auschwitz, if that would have saved 12,000 Jews, God bless those Allied bombers. Tragedy. My son was in the war in Lebanon in '82 in artillery. And when he came back, he told me a thing that I had known, sadly enough. He said that they had received orders that if a PLO position was placed inside a village, and they always placed them inside villages, that the artillery was not allowed to give fire cover to the infantry, as they might kill civilians. Do you know how many soldiers had to go in under sniper fire without fire cover because of that insane order? They shouldn't have been there in the first place. Certainly, we should have allowed the PLO to continue to rain rockets on Kiryat Shmona. Of course. This yo-yo here.
I was in Lebanon on camera.
So therefore, understand. You say that.
You weren't in Lebanon. Easy for you to
If
say.
only you understood Hebrew, there is a normal Israel. Bibi, Anato, Adasot, So therefore, I want them out. I don't want to kill Arabs. I want them to live happily in any of their 22 countries. I don't want to kill Arabs, and I don't want them to kill Jews. I want them out.
And what happens if they come back? How are you going to keep them out?
What happens if they come back? Tell me, people. There are 105 million Arabs surrounding Israel now. How many come back every day? Abubi, leave the driving to me.
What will you do when they don't want to leave? Answer a question.
They will go whether they want to leave or
What will
not.
you do?
It is unbelievable.
What will you do?
It is I'll put them on egged buses. What do you
And
mean?
what happens?
My people have suffered enough.
What happens when they refuse to
My
get on the
people
bus?
have suffered enough. We want our safety, and we will do everything and anything to ensure that there will be a Jewish state always.
Will you kill them?
And so, they will go.
Will you kill them?
God forbid.
And they won't leave.
Will you kill them?
Answer the question.
I just finished saying God forbid.
And they won't leave.
Yes or no? God forbid. No, of course not. We won't kill them.
If they want to stay.
On the day, of course not either. On the day that they hear on the radio that Mayor Khan is prime minister, they'll be across the Jordan River. The real question is, for all of those who don't like that answer. Okay, fine. I certainly can see people saying, I don't like it. Good of you. But when someone says, I don't like it, he had better have a better answer.
We do.
I haven't finished speaking. He had better have a better answer than the answers that they have. They say, the answer is to give up territory for peace.
No, compromise.
The answer is
Compromise.
compromise doesn't mean anything.
Sure,
Compromise
it's
means
basic in the
that you
Talmud.
give up
All my focus
territory
in the
for
Talmud
peace.
is solved by
So
Shara.
therefore,
Compromise. Basic
compromise in practical terms means giving up land. Giving up land. That will not bring peace. It never brought peace.
Murdering people.
When Neville Chamberlain came and he compromised in Munich, that didn't bring us peace.
Hitler wasn't compromising either.
And the tragedy was, that's exactly right, because Hitler wanted to swallow up land which didn't belong to him, and the land of Israel belongs to us.
What was wrong with Hitler killing Jews in Germany?
One other basic
What was
point.
wrong with Hitler killing Jews
One
in Germany?
other basic point, and that is the point that I want to make. First of all, understand.
Germany for Germans?
That when someone calls a
Germany for Germans?
That when someone calls a Jew
Keep on going.
a Nazi or Hitler, what he does is he cheapens the Holocaust. Because the difference between what happened in Germany and what is happening in
Sanctifies the
Israel
Holocaust.
is the,
You cheapen it.
is the following difference. If the Jews of Germany had run around Germany saying, it's really our country, and the Germans took it from us, and when we have the power, we will take it over and call it Israel, then by all means, the Germans would have had a right not to kill the Jews, but to throw them out. But the Jews of Germany wanted nothing more than to be the best Germans that ever lived. The Arabs of Israel don't want to be Jews. are
You're a
Israelis.
Western. You managed to...
They have dreamed for 70 years of taking our country from us. That is a comparison. What an outrage. Not only are these people that have no intellect, but above all, they're dishonest. What a tremendous difference between the Jews of Germany, who wanted nothing more than to be Germans, and the Arabs of Israel, who dream of Palestine and Israel.
Or just the
What a
right.
difference.
So do you want to throw the Christians too?
So therefore, let me finish before taking questions. I'll be happy to take questions because I am better than you are. I am not. Let me finish with a doctor. Rabbi Kahane tells us that God wanted to give the Torah to the Jewish people. All the mountains, the highest mountains, came rushing, and each one said, I want the honor, give it on my feet. And God said, no. I have a small mountain, and it's called Sinai. I want to give it on a small mountain to teach the Jews a lesson that they have to be humble. And that's what, nice lesson, humble. It goes over well in grammar. That's what the Talmud says. The Ger Rebbe, the Rebbe of Gur, was a great scholar and also smart. And so, the Ger Rebbe asked an obvious question, which I think some of the brighter ones here have already asked. And he said, there's something wrong here. If God wanted to teach the Jew to be humble, why didn't he give the Torah in a valley? Great. Think! You don't get more humble than a valley. That's about the lowest you can get. And so, not even for a Dvar Torah have they respect. Not even that.
Well, when you have
And so therefore,
shut up!
he asked the question, a good question, why not give it in a valley? And he gave a better answer. And he said because God wanted to teach the Jews two lessons. One, be humble. Two, don't be too humble. Jews are not valleys. Nobody steps on us. We are mountains. We're not arrogant mountains, but we are mountains. So faith in God and a powerful Jewish arm, and we will bring the Messiah speedily happy in our days.
Yeah, well, what's next?
I'll be happy to take a question. Rabbi. No, Rabbi. Now you can ask legally.
You're here. I'm still here primarily.
Are you here legally?
You want to ask a question?
Mayor, listen.
Mayor. All right, Mayor. Okay, Mayor. Why not? Ask.
When we yell slogans at each other, I can't say completely what I have to say, and you can't say
No.
what you have to say.
You can ask any question. I will not interrupt you.
Why are you a fascist?
I'm not like this. Ask the question. Go.
You're absolutely right.
I know.
Germany is not like the Palestinian situation. We're in a very tough spot. But you are making us into murderers by not looking at the Torah and the Torah's teachings about compromise and an effort to make peace in difficult situations. It says in Pirkei Avos that he who is a true war hero, the person who can make an enemy into a friend. And it didn't say it for its own health. It said it because making a peace is one of the most difficult things in the world. And I just feel that I feel terrible that there's a great deal of passion in you and compassion for the Jewish people that's become distorted into hatred for everybody else. I don't think that's the lesson of the Holocaust. I don't think that's the lesson of suffering. And I think it's blinded you to the sufferings of other people. There are many Palestinians who you describe as all Palestinians.
Hold on. Please, let him speak. Please don't do to him what he did to me.
Many Palestinians that you spoke about as all Palestinians. And I say that the work of peace is to find a coalition and build it. And you are closing the door on that. And as far as letting people speak, the reason why I decided, a very difficult decision for somebody who believes that democracy is a spiritual democratic value, The reason I don't want to let you speak is because the one person who shouldn't speak in democratic society is somebody who wants to end democracy.
That's it, all right? Fine, fair enough. Now, let me answer. I don't know why you say that I want to end democracy. What I said was that there was a contradiction between Western democracy and a Jewish state. I am for democracy for every Jew in Israel, including Yossi Sarit. And believe me, that hurts. You're right, it is not Russian democracy, but it is Zionism.
It's not fairness, it's not Jewish fairness.
It is not Jewish fairness?
No.
My friend, I am going to read to you from the Rambam, which you didn't see. And I say this with a heavy heart.
I heard you in '83, you said the same thing.
If you heard me once and still don't think that I'm right, then you're really sad. That means maybe they didn't hear the Rambam. But what they did hear was that you spoke about Judaism's democracy?
No.
That's not what he said.
That's not what he said.
He let you... Okay. Sorry. Maybe I didn't understand.
Answer the question about compromise.
Does Judaism preach democracy? Rabbi, tell us. And you can tell me now before I quote from it. You know it doesn't.
The Sanhedrin was decided their laws based on vote.
On what?
On vote.
Sorry, on what?
Jewish law was decided on vote in the Sanhedrin.
Absolutely. Jewish law was.
Yeah.
How many Gentiles sat in the Sanhedrin?
They decided by majority law.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I finished talking to you and I said, yes, Jewish democracy.
They
Absolutely.
decided that compassion was a central tenet of Judaism.
Sir, if you want to beat around the bush, then I'll have to read it. I'm going to read you from the Rambam. Maimonides, who we all know was a progressive thinker. He was a doctor.
Who worked for an Arab.
Yes, indeed. And he fled Spain.
And became a doctor to the Sultan.
Yes, yes.
He saved the Sultan's life.
Absolutely. There is no
That was an
question about
Arab,
it.
a dirty Arab. Shouldn't he have let him die?
Chas v'shalom. There is no such thing as a dirty Arab. That is a racist thing to say.
Why do you say it in your writing? Every other sentence. Why do you say it in your
Not every Arab, I said every
Why did you put up
Palestinian
posters?
would like to see Israel become Palestine.
Clean yourself up.
I'm going to quote from the Rambam now. I'm going to quote from the Rambam. It takes it from the Talmud. The Talmud in Masechet, the Mamotem, Kiddushin. Talks about the right of a non-Jew to live in the land of Israel. And I'll give you the source. You can take out a pen and write it down.
I know the source.
You know the source?
Yes, I know the source. Read it.
What's the source?
The Rambam says,
What is the source?
Hilchos Malachim in the Rambam.
Where in Hilchot Malachim? I want to give you the... Are you playing games? No, he is playing games. Hilchot Malachim, because when they take courses, they're not given a source, Socrates. They're told in what chapter?
Chapter 12, Laws of Kings.
So you're wrong.
Thanks, Alan.
A good guess. Chapter 6. Perek Vav, Halacha Aleph.
6?
Chapter 6,
I'm right
Halacha
to kill all the
Aleph.
Palestinians.
And I'm going to read it to you now, so that you will see, and you may not like it. But if you don't like it, know that it's not Kahane. It's Judaism.
C, as it's called, has been making headlines.
If they are willing to make peace, the Kibru Sheva Mitzvot, and accepted the 7 laws of Noah, they then must accept servitude. What is this servitude that they should have? Would you like to translate that? Or shall I? They shall be degraded and low. They shall not raise their head in Israel. But they shall be conquered by them. And they should never be appointed over a Jew in anything ever. Now you may not like this, and this indeed is not Western democracy. This is Judaism.
No, it's not.
So don't battle to me that Judaism
I'm
is
talking
democracy.
to you. Wait, how many commentaries on the Rambam? If we're talking about Rambam, we're talking Torah.
If you find me one commentary on the Rambam or any other commentator
This is no
that differs with this, I will pay your salary if you work for the next 10 years.
How many commentaries on the Rambam? How many commentaries on the Rambam?
I quote upon him. Yes. Yes, sir.
I've read your books recently as the summer, and I've been listening to you talk, and there's just one thing I'm not sure.
Okay.
Once we start killing the Arabs, do we stop on Shabbos?
Did not stop on Shabbos when they killed the Greeks.
But you want to kill the Arabs.
I said, if we ever are in any war with them, you fight the war on Shabbos too. I'll get it. Everybody wants to speak. Yes.
While we're talking about the Jewish problem or them claim to the land, just wanted to say that Yehoshua came into Israel before we even had the true right, except a religious right to Israel, and nobody criticizes. I'm not the great Talmudic scholar, but it's right in the Bible. The thing is, I want to take it more to a nationalistic level.
Yes, but please go ahead.
I agree with some of your analysis. Arabs don't have really any human rights, any other. And actually, their standard of living is higher usually in Israel than it is in most Arab countries. The problem is with the methodology, because if you're going to alienate everyone, you're also going to alienate these Jews. And by doing that, you counter the goals of Israel for serving as being a place for all Jews. If certain Jews feel that they are not welcome in Israel, or feel wrong about living in Israel, if its presence is based on extermination, or moving deportation, or supreme rule over other people, then isn't that countering the purpose of Israel? You know, you say that you don't want to give back land. Now, what about this proposal, which may achieve what you want to achieve, but at with different circumstances? We have an army that can deal with outside forces. We can fight our outside enemies. It's the inside people that you're bothered with. And I am too, because in 50 years, that's the true danger. Wouldn't it be better if we sit down and negotiate and try to come to a settlement where we may give some of the lands back to create a Palestinian country, and in return get back not only guarantees for peace, but also agreement to demands that since it's a Palestinian country, all Palestinians must live there, which in a sense means that all Palestinians who have Israeli citizenship will lose it and will be required to live in this newly created Palestinian state. And thus will remove the inside threat, and we can deal with the outside threat, as we proved 5 times before.
What you're saying is Yours is a more moderate. You don't want to move the Arabs out of the territory. You just want to move the Arabs of Israel out of Israel. That's a tremendous difference between you and me. What if they don't want to go?
As part of the settlement.
What? No, wait. What if the Arabs of Israel say, no one can make a settlement for us. I was born in Nazareth, and I'm staying.
Well, that's what they say that the PLO represents them. I mean, we are sitting to have
What if the Arabs of Israel say, I don't care who said it. I don't want to leave my land. Have you ever spoken to Arabs?
Well, no, I did. No, but never in Israel. It's very tough to talk.
What?
I spoke with the Arabs. Just common people.
Will you tell me right now and tell them whether you ever heard one Arab in Israel say, yes, I am ready to leave the country?
Not in Israel, but in...
I said the Arabs of Israel.
I never spoke. Seriously.
I know that.
No.
Don't have to shoot. Now you spoke, and I'll listen to you. Now listen. What is this contempt for?
No contempt.
You have contempt and don't even know it.
No, absolutely.
Excuse me. I listened to you. I didn't interrupt. This isn't the Knesset. Listen to you. The Arabs of Israel have said 1,000 times over that even should there be a Palestinian state in Judea, Samaria, and Gaza, they will not leave. I understand that, certainly. They don't want to leave because they're convinced that it's only a matter of time before the Galilee becomes part of Palestine.
But why don't we sit down and talk?
You have a problem.
No, I don't.
Let me speak. I listen to you quietly and calmly.
No, you listen to what I asked.
I'm coming to it. So therefore, by giving up land for guarantees? Who will guarantee me that the PLO, their word is their bond? The PLO, their word is their bond. I have to give up land for their guarantees? I'll give them guarantees, and I'll keep the land. If I have a better idea, we'll help give them a state inside Jordan, and then move all the Arabs into Jordan, and then they'll give me guarantees.
That would be beautiful if it worked.
You're right. Well, believe me, it will work much better than your place.
But the thing is, the problem is that nobody sits down to talk.
Oh, you're right. I said earlier, and
you said to talk to say no.
That's exactly right. No to what? To what? No to giving up the land that we have. But I would put I have other plans. I'll put a proposal on the table that we are prepared to waive our rights, time being, to what is Jordan, which is part of it. And I am not prepared to give up land 4 different times the same land. So that's it.
Wait, you have a religious claim over there.
I have a religious claim, an historical claim, a national claim, and most important, a normal claim.
I'm looking at the realistic.
Yes.
Okay, I want to live in Israel. I want my children to live in Israel.
Good.
And the purpose of Israel is that all Jews are safe and free. And right now they are not safe and free. Somewhere Israel went wrong.
Yes.
Now Moshe Dayan said immediately after the 67 war, and I'm sure you remember, you were alive then, I wasn't. I'm waiting for a phone call from Hussein.
Right.
I'm waiting for a phone call from Hussein.
Right.
Why don't we use the West Bank for what its purpose was supposed to be? And eliminate the hazards that having enemies living right next to us with no borders, with world support against us. Instead of it, we can sit down, show it's not our fault that we're not getting peace. It may be their fault. Maybe we won't get peace, but it's their fault. It's not us. We always wanted peace. Jews have never been known for being violent people.
Right. I don't know about that. I mean, pick up the Bible. It's a pretty violent book.
Over the 2,000 years, over the past 2,000 years.
Because we had no state and no army.
But we still survived with no violence.
Not to survive.
Not only survive, but also thrive.
Somebody else speak.
I understand what you said.
That's correct. So it's not religious, it's nationalistic.
The purpose of a Jewish state was certainly the hope that Jews would live in peace. We did indeed go wrong. You know when we went wrong? When Theodor Herzl said that the Jews should have what was then called Palestine, because the Jews are a people with no land, and Palestine is a land with no people. Where was he living? Of course it had people. It had Arabs. That's where he went wrong. When we believed that you could create a state on a silver platter. The problem with Zionism is that it thought that there was no Arab people there. But there was, and there is. And they believe that Jaffa is as much Arab as is Hebron. Of course they do. Speak to them once and listen to them. I sat in the Knesset listening to every Arab Knesset speaker. They all said that. They all said that.
There are dialogue groups all over Israel.
I am ready
and there
to
are
be
Palestinians all over Israel who are prepared for compromise. I spoke to them. Don't tell me what all Palestinians say.
Absolutely.
I've spent the last 7 years of my life talking to Palestinians.
Absolutely,
and
sir.
there are Palestinians who want to make peace.
You are their greatest weapon. They, after speaking to you, they deserve a Nobel Prize for not laughing.
No, you're Arafat's best friend because you demonize us.
Yes,
you are
indeed.
Arafat's best friend.
I demonized the Jews. I started the war in 1947. I did, yes indeed. All by myself. I was 12 years old. I started the war in 1956. I caused Nazis to start a war. I did personally all by myself. 67, I started the Six-Day War. I did. It's already close to 30. Rabbi Kahane.
You were too busy fighting bombs.
The tragedy is a person who hasn't got the slightest understanding that as soon as they saw Jews coming back to the country in 1920, they realized what those Jews wanted. They wanted a state. And that's what they didn't want. Of course this is true. Why the contempt for them? I was there for 7 years, I spoke to them. The Jews have been speaking to them for 70 years already. And the answer is always
there are
the same.
Palestinians who belong in prison, and there are Jews who belong in prison. And you're one of them. The rest of us want to make peace.
The rest of us want to make peace.
That's right.
Living in Massachusetts.
No, sir.
How much of Israel supports you?
Yes, sir. Yes.
You have more support in Massachusetts than you have in Israel.
Very simply, I just want to know if the Arabs won't leave when you pick them up, put them on the Egged buses, will you kill the Arabs? Yes or no?
Maybe I will answer the question. I will do everything necessary to move them out. If I have to use violence, I will use violence against them, yes. And I want to tell you, if any Zionist ever thought that he could have a state, how many Arabs did we kill in the war of 1947? And how many Arabs were killed in 56 and 67 and 73? And I want to tell you something.
What's the point?
The point is that Haba lehogecha
But these
hashem
people aren't
lehogecha.
coming to kill you.
Yes,
You're sitting there
you're
and
right.
killing them.
Thank God he can't do it now because
now
as of
we-
now,
now it's taken another step.
however,
So
I
now
want to
that's
tell
what
you
we're telling
something.
you.
That's your
You
Talmud.
quoted from you quoted from the ethics of the fathers, right? I will too. Ezehu chacham hawet hanolad. Who is wise? He who sees the future. I see the future. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
I just want to. I just want to say that hearing you speak has just shown me how much anti-Israel sentiment is really on this campus coming from Jewish students, and it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart.
Rabbi Kahane. I cannot tell you on how many campuses I've seen Jewish students demonstrate with Arabs carrying signs, long live PLO.
Not under Jewish.
I understand the Arabs. When I see Arabs marching for the PLO, I understand that. Because that is their national freedom movement. But for Jews, the Jews to march with them,
I'm not marching
would there ever
PLO, I'm marching
and I
for
say it
peace.
again,
Not talking to you.
would there ever be a single Arab on any planet who would demonstrate against Arafat? Never. Wrong. And so, you're right. The tragedy is not the Arab. The tragedy is a kind of a self-hate that is a product of 2,000 years of galut, of exile, and it is much easier. And it is much easier to take the Jew out of the exile than to take the exile out of the Jew. Next question.
Rabbi Kahane.
Sheila. If I heard Hebrew, that's it. Sheila. Question, yes.
אם דעותיך כל כך נכונות וכל כך נחוצות, אז למה לפי דעתך? רק לפי דעתך תסביר לנו למה העיפו אותך מהכנסת?
למה מה?
העיפו אותך מהכנסת?
למה העיפו אותך מהכנסת?
The question is, if my views are so right and so and so we're smart and so on and so forth.
Apparently, from what I learned when I was in Israel, the Jews are very loyal to the country they're in. Now, is it every Arab that you want to leave? That you want to leave? Or is it just Palestinians?
If you ever heard Jews speak about Arabs, they make me look modern. The Jews, it's not an accident that they hate the Arabs so. Because what happened to them in Jerusalem, something which you would not want to experience. I'm not speaking about the Jews. Indeed, I go further and I say that any Arab who is ready to live in the Jewish state and accept the Jewish state with his personal rights, but no political rights, can remain in the country. However, if you think that there are 10 young Arabs who would ever accept that, then you have a contempt for them too.
Why shouldn't they be allowed to
So
vote?
the answer is, they will never accept it. They won't accept it. They want their national rights.
Why can't they vote?
So therefore, because on the day that I can vote when I live in Syria, they can vote when I live in
I'd like to ask.
Yes.
I'm a philosophy major here at Brandeis, and I have a question concerning your view of human nature and what the consequences that view would have on the continuing situation. You use an example of a fox, I think, and you said how a baby fox should perhaps be killed because he will certainly grow to be something that's dangerous. What I don't necessarily understand is having that view of nature, of human nature, where people are trapped into their behavior.
Give them what they want. Enjoy it. You're not satisfied. You do not understand the Arabs. Why should they give up Jaffa? They truly believe that it belongs to them.
But the Jordanians don't want that.
If the white government tomorrow in South Africa says, all right, we're going to partition the country, and we white, because let's not compromise and no more blood. See? And we'll take a tenth of the country, right? A tenth of it. You get 90% of the country. What would Mandela say? You know what he would say, and I know what he would say, and we all know what he would say, because...
They know.
That's exactly right. He would...
That fathers sending them to war for a motive or for a movement which is yours, certainly, but not necessarily owned by the rest of Israel. Where is your justification for causing a war, death, religiously and both on a personal level? Where does it come from? Justification of starting this killing over again.
It comes from the fact that for 70 years they tried to kill us. That's where it stems from. And while I would rather not have anybody being killed, if the choice is me or him, it will be him. That is the justification. That is the justification that we Jews will live, and there is no mitzvah for a Jew to die. There is a mitzvah which says, "V'chai b'hem," and you shall live by them, and not die by them.
And not turn the other cheek.
That is the justification. Yeah.
Rabbi, in your opinion, going on a different note, considering you said you were willing to sit down.
Sorry, what?
In your opinion, I'm going on a different path here. You said you were willing to sit down with Yasser Arafat. Do you believe Yasser Arafat really represents, really has total control over the PLO, or that there are these other factions that he focused on, for example, the PLF raid on the...
Absolutely right. The Arabs are so split that nobody can speak for anybody else. But in theory, the PLO as an entity, which of course is not, but in theory, the PLO as an entity does represent Palestine. But could he ever sign anything and bind the Kabbalah? Of course not. The Waqf? Of course not. Of course not. Yesterday's ally is tomorrow's enemy. I remember King Hussein of Jordan in Black September 1970, when they massacred 12,000 Palestinians. And I remember a Palestinian assassinating the Jordanian foreign minister on the steps of the foreign ministry in Cairo and drinking his blood. I tell you, and now of course, we're buddies, and they're this. In the Middle East, there are no buddies. There are today's interests, and tomorrow not. So, you're right. They can't speak for anyone. But since I have to prove to him that I'm really moderate, I'll sit down with him.
I have a question about this.
Well, ask it.
Okay, beyond the whole issue of morality of your proposals, suppose that your proposals were enacted, the Palestinians were expelled from Israel.
Yeah.
Israel gets about $3 billion in foreign aid from the United States every year, not to mention the large amount of aid from individual Jews and Jewish organizations in the United States. It's very likely that if your policies were carried out, this would be cut off. How would Israel survive?
Well, okay. First of all, I don't know if it's likely. It is most certainly possible. It is most certainly possible that America will correct it. It is certainly possible. In my platform, one of our major planks is that we want to put an immediate end to U.S. economic aid.
But not military.
It doesn't, and I will come to that. In Turkey's book, it also says something about people who interrupt others. I believe that issue has become an economic junkie. Every year gets its annual fix, and it has turned Israel into a vassal state, a client state of America. It doesn't follow its own interest because it is afraid of America. Our interests, for example, just one example, with Iraq. Our interest is not Kuwait. I could care less about Kuwait. I know that Kuwait was the main center for the Arab boycott against Israel. Our interest is to dispose of the nuclear capacity